Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. I'm back with another recap of a matchup I've been waiting for pretty much all of this year. The number one ranked UCLA against the number six ranked USC, an interstate rivalry between the two, a matchup of the Titans, a marquee matchup between Juju Watkins as well as Lauren Betts. And then, of course, you have Kiki Rice and Kiki Arafin as well. This matchup didn't go as I thought it would go, but it turned out to be a classic matchup, a very intriguing matchup as well. When you think about the dynamics of this matchup. So coming in, I thought Lauren Betts would have a bigger role, but I was proven wrong from the jump. Juju Watkins was very aggressive to start this matchup. She did take 26 shots, and she ended up making 12 of them, going 6 of 9 from the three-pointers, and then 11 rebounds and 8 blocks as well. Now, these 8 blocks is what separates her from most of the superstars in our game, whether it be the WNBA, the NBA. Not only can she score and she can rebound, and she can do a little passing as well, because with her stat line of having 35 and 5 is the first time that happened in 20 years in the women's basketball in Division I. But her ability to defend, not just as an on-ball defender, because she probably is not the best on-ball defender, but as far as help defense and things like that, she has proven to be pretty superb. She has multiple games with multiple blocks. So it shows you she has some interest on defense. She's not a blow-by. She's not one of those players that just want to play offense. She does care about defense. And I believe her coach, Lindsay Gottlieb, preaches that defensive part as well, as most coaches should, especially in basketball, preaching that defensive end, because it's not like football where you get to sit defense out. You have to play both sides of the court. And Lindsay Gottlieb, she does preach that in, and it shows from her players. Most of her players are pretty decent defenders. But, that 8 blocks, like I talked about, is what separates Juju from other players. It might not, it's not the pretty thing that people like to see, but it is what makes her a star. It's not what gave her the commercials and the adulation and all this praise, but it is something that helped her win games and help her team win games, I should say. So it definitely separates her in that aspect. So all of the great players that we see, they don't have that defensive tenacity that she has. But nevertheless, she was very aggressive. And like I said, she had that stat line of over 35 and 5, which is the first time that happened in 20 years in Division I women's basketball. Kiki Arafin was the only other player in double figures on her team, which she had 13 points and 9 rebounds, which she's a top 5 draft pick, prospectively coming up in the WNBA draft. So that was kind of interesting as well, that there were the only 2 players in double figures. But when you have a player who takes 26 shots out of the 63, I believe it is, there's not going to be a lot of other shots going around. You got to be pretty proficient to get to double figures off of those numbers. Lauren Betts, she started as well. She had 18 points, 13 rebounds, around her usual production. And then Kiki Rice also had 15 points and 6 rebounds, which is pretty impressive to have 6 rebounds for a smaller guard. But she had that. But USC came up a little short. I think during the course of the game, they were down 10 points, doing points of the game, but they made a comeback. They were very competitive. And I believe this game was much closer than it appeared to be. It was an 11-point game win for USC, but it appeared much closer in the game. Towards the end, it started getting away from the free throw shooting and things like that, like you have in a normal basketball game. But for the most part, it was back and forth. But USC's defense was the difference in this game, being able to hold Lauren Betts under 50% shooting. And everyone that played was under 50% shooting except for Janiyah Barker. Everyone else was under 50% shooting, and the whole Lauren Betts under 50% shooting is pretty impressive. She's 6'7", has this excellent skill set. She's no slouch on the defensive end either. But with her skill set and her ability, I thought she would put up at least 24 points. But her being able to be held under her 50% shooting kind of, it held her back from getting that 24 points that I thought she would get. The rebounds is what she'll always probably get, just being that height and having that skill set and having those fundamentals. So she'll always get to that point, I believe. But kudos to USC for showing that defensive tenacity just in time for the tournament. We know in a couple of weeks that Big Ten tournament will start. It's going to be very competitive in that Big Ten tournament, and you want to go with your best foot forward, especially coming off that loss that USC had from Iowa with Caitlin Clark in attendance. So I think that left a sour taste in their mouths. So USC the stakes were risen in this game, because I don't think if they lost to Iowa, they might have not came out the same way, or Juju might have not came out with that same intensity. But seeing that they lost to Iowa, an unranked team, but they did lose in Iowa, but losing to that team, I think it upped that urgency for them, because they needed this matchup to not lose that standing and still be in the running for that number one seed come tournament time. That are still going to have to put in the work in the Big Ten tournament. But I think UCLA is pretty much locked up a one seed unless they just spit the bit in the tournament and just lose in the first round. I believe they'll have a bye in the first round, but if they lose their first game, maybe they might lose the number one seed. But I think for the most part, they'll have that number one seed. But, like I talked about before, that Big Ten tournament is going to be something to deal with. You just don't have USC and UCLA to worry about, and not just the Big Ten tournament, but the NCAA tournament as well. You have Notre Dame, which is the only other loss that USC had, which isn't a bad loss because of the depth that Notre Dame have, with Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles. They have some top draft picks over there coming up in the WNBA draft. They have a very good team, and their ranking will be going up this week as well, I believe, with the UCLA's loss. I don't project UCLA to go down no further than 2 or 3, but it's very competitive in that tournament. So that's why it's very important for USC and other teams as well to, get that camaraderie figured out before that tournament starts, because one false move and you could be out of the tournament from 11th seed or 12th seed. It's just that competitive in NCAA women's basketball this year. But, with all the talent going around, you got South Carolina, LSU's, the Notre Dames, UConns, and Texas, all are going to, slated to make deep runs. That Sweet 16 is going to be a gauntlet of teams that you would have to go through and try to figure out. Every matchup is going to be pivotal. I think it's going to be a lot of close games as well. And also some sleeper teams that I like was, Ole Miss and Oklahoma. Ole Miss just because of the length that they have, and Oklahoma just because of the style they play. They play this rugged kind of 80s basketball type style where they're setting these hard screens, and they have shooters that can come off these screens as well. So it's going to be very competitive going forward. And UCLA plays USC one more time on March 1st before they have to play them in a tournament or anything like that. But that matchup's going to be at UCLA. This matchup was at USC. So let's see if that plays any difference in the matchup styles. I think the strategy for USC is going to have to be very similar. They're going to need Juju to be aggressive because they don't have a lot of aggressive players on the offensive end. Now, on the other side, UCLA, Lauren Betts is going to have to be aggressive, and Kiki Rice as well, to make sure that they stay in the game and they can get enough shots up. And they're going to have to improve that efficiency, and they're going to have to figure out how to wear USC's defense down to get those efficient shots. But I'll be covering that March 1st matchup. I believe it's on a Saturday night, 8 Eastern, I do believe. So I will be covering that matchup when it happens. And until next time, I'll see you next time.